So welcome everyone to the beginning of the second half of the learning journey that we started in March called Regenerating the Earth Through Collapse. And we have certainly been experiencing lots of disruptions in the last several months, lots of chaos, lots of disorientation, lots of weird things happening in the world. I kind of keep a mental checklist of how many times World War III was supposed to have started, but the propaganda machine was confusing us. But suffice it to say that our travels in the last month have helped us to get really grounded. And maybe Penny, if you could share what your purpose was in the travel, because it's so related to that.
Yeah, and I'll talk about this more later when we share our reflections about the pilgrimage. But my intention for the pilgrimage was to connect with what's real. And that has certainly happened. So I'll share more about that a little later.
Yeah. So our format today is that I've got a slide deck and a presentation that might take about 20 or 25 minutes that is going to lay out how we came to this point with the first half of the learning journey. So I'll give a brief review and then go into what we're going to do in the second half of the learning journey and how we're moving forward into the upcoming bioregional pilgrimages and beyond, where we've gotten a lot more clarity about timelines and structures of what's going to be happening. And then after that, what we're going to do is we're going to have some personal storytelling and sharing of testimonials, if you will, of what has been happening on the pilgrimage throughout the Mississippi Basin. So some of you met with us or received us to your communities while we've been traveling in the last few weeks. And so those who have been doing that, will invite to share some of their reflections of what's been happening, because it's been quite powerful, this process of seeding the Dandelion strategy for bioregional learning centers. And several new seeds have been planted for different places to create them in the last few weeks. So the work has definitely been moving forward offline and in the world. And so with that said, I think I'll go ahead and start the presentation. And then afterwards, we'll have time for those sharings from some of the participants. And then we'll have some time for open discussion to bring us into a close for the day. And so with that said, let's get this show on the road. There we go. What? I don't want that. That's trying to get me to permit something that I don't know what it is, so I want to turn it off. That's annoying. Yay for these rogue software tools doing whatever they want on our computers, and we don't even know about it. All right, so with that said, let's go over here and get started. So the title for today's webinar is the kickoff webinar for phase 2 on design practice for the learning journey called Regenerating the Earth Through Collapse. And what we want to do is just look at how we've come to be where we are now, and where we are now and where we're going. And as part of a review, just to remind us, this is something we've been talking about in our public talks in the last month, and something we talked about at the beginning of the learning journey, that roughly 1970 is when humanity crossed the threshold of the carrying capacity of the Earth, where we entered into ecological overshoot, and the human footprint consumes more than the Earth can naturally regenerate. So we've been doing that for more than half a century. We also entered into a time of increasingly reductionistic and fragmented environmental discourse, distracting us into consumer market capitalism instead of dealing with what really needs to happen. And that there's a small window of time where some kind of a large phase transition could occur that will not stop the collapse, but will create a pathway through to the other side, or at least the best chance for one that exists. And so we're very aware that this is a dangerous and precarious time, that social and ecological breakdown are happening all around us with increasing frequency and increasing intensity, and that this is a very confusing time to be. And so in the midst of this, we created this learning journey. And so the timeline for the learning journey that we shared when we started looked like this, that the learning journey began in March and ends in September. It's beginning and ending at the equinoxes. And that during the first half of the learning journey, we would have a series of webinars, community calls and integration sessions that were about laying the groundwork. What is our strategy? How do we go about doing this work of regenerating the earth through collapse? So that's the work that we did between March and the end of May. And then we entered into one of our immersive experience periods. The second half that we're starting today is 5 cycles, which means 5 periods of these webinars, community calls, and integration sessions, focusing on design practice. Thematically, what we're going to do differently is in these 5 biweekly cycles, we're going to explore case studies, real world practice and experience, and the lived experience of those of us doing this work. So today, what that means is the lived experiences of the pilgrimage through the Mississippi Basin. But then in future webinars, we'll be exploring ways that people are manifesting this strategy in their different bioregions. So more of that to come soon. And these immersive experiences, which are a really big part of this learning journey, one of them is happening right now because Penny and I are sitting at Dave Wolf's table. That we are actually having an immersive experience out in the world. And when today's webinar is over, we're actually going to eat some lovely spaghetti made by Dave's daughter. And then we're going to go out and visit a confluence and then go and have some afternoon activities in the community. So these immersive experiences are happening all around us. What I want to do really briefly is summarize, especially for anyone who's just joining the learning journey now. I'll say there have been 5 previous webinars. You can go back and watch them on the Mighty Networks platform. We strongly encourage you to do that. But here's a very brief summary of what we covered in the first half of this learning journey. So we started off by just describing what do we mean by regeneration of the earth through collapse. The key takeaway here is that we wanted to get real about where we are in this planetary collapse process. It is not in the future, even though some of the worst of it is yet to come. Some of it is in the past, meaning it's already occurred. We're in the middle of it. And if we're going to navigate our way through, we have to somehow live into regenerative ways of being in the midst of collapse, and it can't be avoided. And we talked about that in a pretty direct and strong way back in March. That was a major part of the integration sessions throughout, a big part of the various spaces in the design school where dialogue has been occurring, as well as our on-the-ground community conversations. Then we had a webinar where we introduced the Dandelion strategy and our vision to birth at least 1,000 bioregional learning centers between now and 2035. And this was where we revealed the strategy for how everyone can participate in the regeneration of the earth where they are by working toward creating their own bioregional learning centers and naming the history and the legacy, celebrating the work of Dana Meadows, the Limits to Growth study, the historic bioregional movement of the last 50 years, all the relocalization work that's been happening in many places around the world, and that what we need now is a strategy that can propagate and replicate very quickly. And what we found is we named this strategy at the end of March, and it has been propagating ever since. And it's really working. Then we had a webinar where we talked about how we can live through collapse by focusing on bioregional learning, learning how to live in place where we move toward harmony with living systems. What are all the ways that we learn how to live in place, and how does that help us to increase community resilience, invoke or inspire a kind of dreaming and imagination into regenerative futures without ignoring or denying collapse, and how bioregional learning ecosystems enable us to navigate the collapse processes as they occur and move toward greater resilience. Sort of the underlying argument for why bioregional learning centers, in a way. And that this is where we talked about how we need to embrace the already existing intelligence of living systems that is all around us. Regeneration is occurring in our waterways, in our soils, in our atmosphere, in our ecosystems. We are just doing a really bad job of relating to it and doing a lot of harm to those living systems. And the other one is learning how to organize ourselves in our local contexts with greater capacity over time. And that bioregional learning includes learning how to organize your life place. Then we went into discussing how dandelion seeds can actually be kinds of action or activism. And we talked about how there are different kinds of activism in the world, and that what this strategy embraces is the activism, the kind of dragon dreaming, for those of you who know what that is, the kind of moving toward the futures that we know are needed, how to live with a bioregional mind and enact and express a bioregional imagination, and do the systemic organizing work that makes it possible to find transition pathways. Transition pathways away from the extractive economy, the life destroying economy, and move toward life affirming and life perpetuating economies at local, regional, and planetary scales. And then we concluded the first 5 webinars of the learning journey by talking about islands of coherence, about the complexity science of phase transitions, of self-organized criticality, and why it's so important to understand that when breakdown accelerates, all of those structures that got in our way get out of our way. And it is possible to self-organize coherently in small islands of coherence that can propagate their relationships up to a complete transformation of the human presence on Earth, and that this catalyzes that phase transition. So we explained how that works. And what all of this does is it gives us a direction for humanity's future. How we as human beings can self-organize by planting dandelion seeds, by embracing how to learn to live in place, by dreaming into collective futures through the ways that we organize, and by catalyzing the creation of many islands of coherence as the breakdown intensifies all around us. So that's like the summary of the first half of the learning journey. And so these dandelions that we're talking about are bioregional learning centers. So we named really clearly our vision is at least 1,000 bioregional learning centers in the next 10 years. I would say in the last month, we probably catalyzed about 10 new ones. And I don't mean new as in they weren't doing anything, but that everything they were doing caused them to realize that the bioregional learning center is what they should be going toward. And so we saw that yesterday here at a place called the Agraria Center for Regenerative Practices at Yellow Springs, Ohio. Some of you may know that that's a place of radical transformation work for a number of decades. And so we're planting these seeds everywhere. And this is our large scale strategy. So just to review really briefly that dandelions are not literally what we're doing, although Penny and I actually, we would stop at a turnout for a viewpoint or where there's a gas station with a bathroom or anywhere at all, absolutely everywhere that we traveled. We put more than 9,000 miles on a car, by the way. Every single place that we have been literally has had dandelions. So we don't actually need to plant dandelions. They're doing just fine. We need to plant dandelions of human regenerative culture. But the reason we do that is because the dandelion is a very intelligent strategy, because there's an evolutionary intelligence to the way dandelions propagate. They do not know where to plant their seeds. They do not know which seeds will germinate and take root. So what they do is they create a bunch of seeds and they propagate them into the wind. And the strength of this strategy is the diversity and number of seeds. And very important for us silly old humans to embrace the emergent process, to embrace our own ignorance, to know we cannot know which ones are going to work, and then let that propagation occur. And as we do that, let us be surprised by the profound resilience of life itself. So that's our dandelion strategy. And the Bioregional Learning Center, just as a review, after the Limits to Growth study in 1971, 10 years of meetings with what was called the Balaton Group by the early 1980s, basically the only way to live within planetary limits, the best and only way, is to create local living economies organized as bioregions all over the planet. Each one of them needs to have its own bioregional learning center. Thank you, Dana Meadows, for naming this more than 40 years ago. I just basically wrote a footnote to her work by saying basically the same thing with a little bit more new methods and techniques that have been developed in the last 40 years in my own book. But basically, living out the design pathway for regenerating Earth is about creating bioregional learning centers all over the planet. And so this dandelion strategy is about awakening that imagination everywhere, everywhere that we can. And so in the last month, Penny and I have been traveling in a way that we're planting seeds for these BLCs across the heart of Turtle Island, throughout the major watersheds, the headwaters and the confluences of major river systems that comprise the Mississippi Basin, which we now have a deep appreciation for how powerful and unstoppable the Mississippi is. For those of you who don't know your Ojibwe language, I'll just share that Mississippi is an Ojibwe word, which means the father of all waters. And so this is a massive living system at a continental scale that we now have an intimate relationship with. And we've been planting these seeds all over it. We'll be talking about that in just a moment. And so just to share a little bit about the route that Penny and I took in the last month, where we started in St. Louis at the confluence of the Missouri River and the Mississippi River, which we will return to St. Louis tomorrow night to finish our journey. We traveled through the Ozarks, the Missouri River Valley near Kansas City, up to Milwaukee and Madison in Wisconsin, up to Minneapolis, St. Paul, up to Lake Itasca in Minnesota, where the Mississippi is born, followed out the Missouri River all the way to Montana, to the headwaters of the Missouri River, to Yellowstone National Park, where the Yellowstone River's headwaters are, down the Front Range of the Continental Divide, to the headwaters of the Arkansas and Cimarron Rivers, to the high plains and the Ogallala and the works happening in the panhandle of Texas and Amarillo, down to the incredible Delta in New Orleans, then up the Delta to where the Arkansas joins and where other rivers join, up to Memphis. And then we went out to the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee and North Carolina, which is actually, for those who don't know this, Smoky Mountain National Park is not only the largest national park in the United States by land area, it's also the birthplace of about 50 small rivers who all in aggregate birth the Tennessee River. So the headwaters of the Tennessee River is the Smoky Mountains, those incredible ethereal blue mountains. And then we came up here where we are now in the Great Miami River that drains into the Ohio, which the Ohio River is one of the largest tributaries of this system. And so we've been traveling this way, and our mission was to awaken bioregional imagination and plant seeds for BLCs, and boy, did we succeed. It has been working. And so in addition to that, we have more of them coming, just so that you can see the feel of this movement. So at the end of this second phase of the learning journey, we're going to go visit bioregional learning sites in Tunisia, which Penny and I did earlier this year, but we're inviting a lot of other folks. And so between September 18th and 29th, there will be a Mediterranean bioregional activation that will occur, where there will be a pilgrimage for people wanting to create bioregional learning centers to sacred sites along the Mediterranean coast and the edge of the Great Sahara Desert. There will be a 3-day workshop to catalyze a Mediterranean hub for bioregional learning centers across the Mediterranean. And then this activation that I have a hard time knowing what to call it, Western Europe, Rivers of the North Sea, British Isles, is like all of our naming is a little dumb at this point. So I'll just let it be clumsy and say that those names will emerge from the bioregional organizing that is already happening in many landscapes. And you all who live there will figure it out. For now, I'll just clumsily say Western Europe bioregional activation. So October 2nd through the 18th, Penny and I will be traveling to meet many of you in France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and the UK, where bioregional learning centers are already being formed at different stages of development. And so this will inspire even more dandelion seeds as we do this throughout September and October. And so we'll be inviting people to join us and do parallel organizing, and you'll see that in the way this learning journey is going to unfold. So in addition to that, Penny and I still live in Barichara, Colombia, and we have a great team of people doing working on creating a bioregional learning center there. So I just wanted to name this one because I think it's a great inspiration for us. The learning ecosystem that we call Sueños del Bosque, which is Spanish for Dreams of the Forest, is bringing bioregional learning processes with a focus on children. And so we are moving toward creating a Northern Andes bioregional learning ecosystem through the territories of Colombia. And the focus of this one is the hydrological systems of the Northern Andes and regenerative education for children. So all of you out there who do any kind of work at all with kids, come talk to us, and let's see how we can weave those efforts. And we actually have a really cool crowdfunding opportunity with Ma Earth starting tomorrow, where we'll be raising money for Sueños del Bosque in parallel with 99 other regenerative land-based projects. So stay tuned for that coming soon. And so basically, we're activating all this work in the Mississippi Basin, which we've been doing in the last month. We're already making preparations to activate a lot of bioregional learning centers in the Mediterranean Basin, throughout the North Sea and the rivers that drain into it, in Western Europe and the British Isles. There will be organizing in the Northern Andes that will continue, Cascadia, the Great Lakes, and so on and so on. And that this is the revolution of consciousness, how we live and organize in this way. And so the Dandelion strategy reveals that there is a way to get to that new world, and that we do it by living it out in as many places as possible. So this is a graphic that we created for our talks in the end of the last learning journey, but I want to just remind us of it, that our timeline is basically that the design pathway for regenerating Earth was articulated in 2020, showing us that there is a logic to how to do this. The first real world prototype for us, meaning for myself and people I was working with, and Penny joined us in this later, is to create our own real world prototype in the Northern Andes, learning what works and what doesn't. Starting at the end of 2022, Penny and I started doing bioregional activations, catalyzing a lot more local organizing. And we just learned recently the total amount of money moved into this network through the Novo Foundation, which was inspired by these activations, was about $50 million to bioregions around the world. The Design School for Regenerating Earth was created March of 2023. The Earth Regeneration Fund was created officially in the fall of 2024, where we began seeding funding into these networks. The Dandelion strategy was created earlier this year. Penny and I are now doing these bioregional pilgrimages with many design school members around the world. We're preparing to create an action network for bioregional learning centers, which will be part of the work of the second phase of the learning journey, is some of the building out of that and getting it ready to go. And what we see is throughout the next months, 2 years, that we will create living flows of financial resources, learning exchanges, and people traveling between places across a planetary network of bioregional learning centers, so that the dandelion seeds can propagate, with the goal of birthing at least 1,000 bioregional learning centers by 2035. And so this is how we're doing it. This is how we do our part to birth the new world, along with all of the other millions of local regenerative projects that need to self-organize toward the bioregional scale. And so, what can you expect during this learning journey? How do we see this unfolding for us in the next couple of months? Well, starting today, June 30th, through September and October, when these pilgrimages occur, what we're going to have is a bi-weekly or a 2-week cycle of webinars, community calls, and integration sessions, just like we did in the first half of the learning journey. We will have 5 of those. So there will be 5 webinars, followed by actually 10 community calls, because there's one for the Western Hemisphere and one for the Eastern Hemisphere, and 5 integration sessions. So this is just like what we did before. And that these webinars, community calls, and integration sessions will be held around the theme of case studies and design tools for enacting the Dandelion strategy, including building infrastructure and learning supports that we need to create for this strategy to be able to manifest itself. And that as we bring this period of online work to an end, we'll go into that next wave of bioregional pilgrimages into the Mediterranean and Western Europe, so that we'll continue seeding this strategy into the world, strengthened by this series of webinars, community calls, and integration sessions in the next couple of months. And that during this time, in addition to all of that, we will be incubating new capacities with many of you. There's a lot more going on than bi-weekly webinars. So we're incubating new capacities for this work to occur. We are designing a BDC, for those of you who know about permaculture, and PDCs, permaculture design certificates. We're going to launch the first bioregional design certificate in November. And so we're going to be getting that ready to go so it can be launched after the pilgrimages and at the end of this learning journey. And that we're going to grow our reach in the world. Some of you might have been tracking that I created a Substack account in February. It will reach its 2000th subscriber in the next day or two. And so we've been growing our reach of telling stories. That's just one channel, because also lots of you are telling your stories as well. So we're growing our reach into the world by parallel place-based organizing, as well as storytelling out into the world. And that we're working on attracting the finances we'll need. There's a lot happening behind the scenes around how we're trying to make all of this visible and coherent to funders of various scales. And that we're preparing the launch of the BLC Action Network that will officially launch in January. And so the timeline and flow for the rest of this year looks like this: that we started off with the learning journey from March through September, that we have this pilgrimage through the Mississippi Basin that's ending tomorrow, that we'll have the pilgrimage through the Mediterranean and Western Europe in September and October, and that in November, we're going to launch the first bioregional design certificate course. So stay tuned. We'll be sharing more information about that and how you can enroll, as well as invite your friends. And that we're going to launch the Bioregional Learning Center Action Network in January. And so the idea is that we want to cultivate more reach with active storytelling throughout this whole period of time. We're just continually telling our stories from everywhere to everywhere as the strategy manifests all over the world. That we want to seed more BLCs into being during the learning journey and beyond. And this will continue to happen. We want to spread to more locations around the world and invite them into this network strategy. We want to cultivate shared language and core knowledge, which is one of the things that the BDC is going to do, is be sure that when we talk about bioregional learning centers, we actually have a basic shared understanding of what the heck that is. And that will propagate out to form planetary networks. And that this will be happening during the learning journey through these design sessions and case studies, as well as through all of these other activities. So you can see what we're going to be doing with this learning journey. And so with that, I want to shift gears now and share what it looks like in the real world, to ground this in practical reality by talking about the pilgrimage that is coming to an end tomorrow. This awakening of bioregional imagination in the heart of Turtle Island with this beautiful lobe-like butterfly structure that is the Mississippi Basin. And to say that our pilgrimage to seed the dandelion strategy is succeeding and is continuing to succeed. And I just want to briefly name that those of you who haven't followed the writings on Substack, I'd encourage you to find 3 different articles that I published that are also in the Regenerating the Earth Through Collapse learning journey space. One of them was called An Important Update, Our Vision to Birth 1,000 BLCs, which summarized our time in the Ozarks, the Missouri River Valley, and in Milwaukee and Madison, Wisconsin, where we shared how the BLCs were taking form in the first week with practical insights into that process. Then there was an article called Sacred Headwaters Help Show Us the Way, sharing some of our learnings of visiting the birthplace of the Mississippi River and the Missouri River and the Yellowstone River. We visited other headwaters after this, but I'd encourage you to go read this article. It's really powerful what we're learning about sacred headwaters. And then about a week ago, I published an article about how we can understand the living systems of the Earth informed by Earth system science and astrobiology to understand how we should create financial flows and living economies up to the planetary scale. You'll find all of these in the learning journey space, as well as on the Earth Regenerator Substack. But I just want to share them with you here to say, if you want to go back and read more about this and share it with others outside of the design school, that these are great materials to use. And so with that in mind, what I want to do now is move over to some storytelling. And I want to start by spotlighting ourselves so that Penny can share some of her experiences. And then we'll pass over to Dave to share his. And if there are others on this call who participated in person with some of our local events during the pilgrimage through the Mississippi Basin, please just raise your hand or drop a note in the chat, and we can create a list of people to invite on to share. because I can't see everyone on the call, so I'm not sure who all is here. But I want to start now by just passing it over to Penny to share some of her experiences.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, so what I wanted to share is a little more, like that was like a broad overview, and I want to share more my personal reflections and my personal experience on this pilgrimage, the things that I would say the realizations I've been having and the connections I've been making. I'm in process. I'll just say, like, this is a lot to integrate because we've been moving through really quickly from place to place, and I still have a lot to integrate, but I have some things I can share now, and I think more will be coming. So like we said in the beginning of this webinar, my personal intention going into this was to connect with what's real. And for me, that meant like what's kind of underneath or more permanent, more real than like this noise that the humans are making on top all of our dramas, and what's really real, more like eternal, I guess I would say. So that was my intention. I didn't exactly know what that meant, but definitely a lot has been revealed in the process. So the first thing I want to talk about is some of the patterns I've been seeing as we visited the headwaters and the confluences and then traveled across the landscapes. So for me, the headwaters are really interesting. There's this pattern of what I'm calling like a gathering of water, and a coalescing. So, and it happens in different ways in the mountains. It snows or it rains, and then the waters like start trickling down, and then they start to come together and they start to gather into pools, or they start to gather into a stream, and then the streams start to gather together, and then that's what we call headwaters, is when those trickles start to come together into a more like coherent artery, or a river. And like in Minnesota, at the headwaters of the Mississippi, it's the moraine system. So the waters gather in this like sponge, the sponge of the earth, and form lakes all over the place. And then they start to, gravity pulls together into a river. Or in the Andes, it's the same thing, like into a Potamo, what's called a Potamo. It's like this spongy landscape that soaks up the water, and then the rivers are born. So this sense of a gathering, and then the fractal nature of, there's no like place the river starts. It's like all of these places all together, and then they coalesce, come together, and then we name it, and we say this is the beginning of the river, when really it's not. It's that is what I'm learning, and it's fractal in nature. And that it like forms these big arteries that then return to the whole. They return to the sea and then circulate back again. And then at the confluences, this has been really interesting to me. The confluences, which are also headwaters in many cases, the confluences of two rivers, that what we've seen is that it doesn't matter how big or small these rivers are, it's a gentle meeting. It can be like, the Missouri River is so powerful, coming to meet the Mississippi, these huge river systems, and they meet in this super gentle way. It's really peaceful. One river will yield to the other river, and then they'll start to kind of like talk. Basically, they won't mix right away. You can see a line where they're meeting. And then downriver, they start to finally come together and merge. So this is like a really good way to think about confluencing, right, Bill? Bill and Ralph, confluencing.
Totally.
Because you don't just like come into relationship and you're like together, right? You come and you meet in a gentle way, and you get to know each other, and then you join together. So that's what I've been learning, just how gentle it is, and how it takes time. It takes time to come into relationship in a really healthy way. And then the other thing, just the driving between landscapes that's really landing in me is that it's like nothing's separate. The landscapes are very distinct. When you go into a new landscape, it can be the Rocky Mountains, or it's the marshlands, or it's the like down in the Delta. These are very distinct landscapes, but when we move between them, like what I feel is that it's all one landscape in my body. I feel it now because there is no separation. There's no separation at all. And then the waters actually move through these landscapes and bring the stories from the different landscapes with the water, and the waters bring the life. So it's like this for me, an embodied feeling of the one basin, the Mississippi. It's one basin, it's one landscape that's all connected and yet diverse at the same time. Gosh, there's so much to share. The other thing, there's other points along the journey that were moments of deep realization. And one of those was when we met with David Hankey, who is one of the originators of the bioregional congresses in Turtle Island in the Ozarks. And we had some very deep conversations with David. And one of the things we were talking about is congressing. We were talking about the Turtle Island Congress that is about to happen in Cascadia. And he was talking about what congressing meant for them in the past when they were doing congresses. And he was saying they would not have an agenda. And so everybody would come together and then basically just be together in the landscape, in the bioregion. And after about 3 days was when something would start to shift and coalesce. And the people would start to connect with the intelligence of the bioregion and with each other. And the bioregion itself would guide the process from there forward, what would be needed in the bioregion, or the various if it was a gathering in the continental scale, the various bioregions together. So he called this Earth Mind. And to me, it's like this reinforcement that the intelligence is in the bioregion themselves, in the bioregions themselves, in the Earth itself, and that we need to slow down and connect with that intelligence, and that intelligence is what's going to guide us. So that is just, it's reinforcing that for me, and that is what I want to be doing in my life, is slowing down and connecting to that intelligence that's already there. And then related to that, for me, with this intention of getting real or connecting with what's real, what I think maybe this is the thing that's the hardest to explain, but maybe the most significant, is that when we went to Theodore Roosevelt National Park and we saw buffalo that had been reintroduced into the landscape, what I started to feel is like I could feel that and not very long ago, there were hundreds of thousands of buffalo in that landscape. So I could feel the past health just by like being with the buffalo who are there now. I could start to feel what that health was like of the landscape, and that it's actually still there. And then overlaid on that is the human activity. Like there's all this fracking all around there, oil, extraction. But it's like this human overlay where there's a little bit of noise happening where we're doing some destruction. But I could feel the health, and I could feel what could be the regenerative future, because like if I could tune into that core health of the landscape that is much more real and much more permanent and can be returned to and will be returned to in one way or the other. So this for me relates to my healing work, because when I do this work called biodynamic craniosacral, what we do is we connect with the intelligence and the core health of the system first. And then all of the pain and the trauma and all of the stuff, other stuff is like an overlay obscuring that core health. And when we can align with that core health, then the rest of the noise starts to align around that intelligence. And this is just another way of saying the earth has this core intelligence that if we can connect with it and actually feel these forces and feel the intelligence, then that is what's going to come to the forefront. And then that's how we align around a regenerative future. So it's in our bodies and it's in the landscape, both. It's all around us. If we can actually feel it. And I could feel it when I was with those buffalo. That's what I could feel. Yeah, so there's more. There's the seeing more of the overlay of humans, like in Great Falls. This is like literally we put a dam.
Offensive. One of the most beautiful sacred places, and this guy's like, "Oh, I could just like dominate and extract from that. Let me just destroy it."
Yeah,
Continue.
yeah, in Great Falls, what we did is we put dams on top of waterfalls. So like literally overlaid the waterfalls with these dams, and you can see it. There's the waterfalls are still there with these dams on top. 5 of them. But what's underneath those dams is the waterfalls. It's still there. The water is still there. That's what's more real. And so like let's focus on that, on the health of what's underneath and aligning ourselves to that. So yeah. And one other thing is just in terms of the human relationships. Just to say every place we went, it's kind of like unbelievable the incredible work that's happening in all of these places. Like it's just so deep. It's been decades long work, restoring watersheds and community resilience and working with local food systems. And it's just like, very, very impressive. And in every stop, there were not as many, but a few people who are thinking about this like next evolutionary leap that we need to make, which is to organize up in scale, organize and weave these processes together to the bioregional scale and then to the planetary scale. But there was always some of those weavers present. So, it's happening. It's and the work, the basis of the work is really strong for us to be able to do this in everywhere we went. And then one other thing, just at a personal level, I'll share is that the personal level of relation started to come up for me on this trip when we were in Boulder, my hometown, and I was so excited to take part of this event that was finally happening in Boulder to do bioregional organizing. And then my mom went into the ER. And so I had to go to the ER and be with my mom because nobody else in my family was there during this time. And so like I was like in the event and out of the event and going to see my mom and like, an aging parent who is a little bit hard to deal with at this point. And so these personal relationships are also at the core. It's like if there's we have to take care of our aging parents. We have like our partners. If those relationships are not healthy and not supporting us, they can actually hinder us and bring us off track and in certain ways. And so just to say like all of those the relational part of this it's at the center of our lives. So it's at the center of everything that we're doing. And that was like a very stark example of, okay, I need to go be with my mom. She's in the ER. I need to be with her. And yeah, so I think that's all I'll share. I have more, but I'm going to stop because that was a lot. Yeah.
Well, just to take a moment and then we'll transition over to Dave and say that I will not share my reflections for now because I want to make space for others to share theirs. But that I'm having similarly deep and profound experiences. And just have to say that going and being with the bioregions, there's just no replacement for that.
Hmm.
You know, you can't have a data mining chatbot do it for you. You can't have some like brilliant designer or engineer do it for you. You can't have a technology tool do it for you. Just want to name that because there are a lot of people who have really gone pretty idiotic. Basically, they've just been pulled into deep Wetiko patterns of separation, and they have no idea how intelligent the Earth is because they're completely disconnected. So the connecting is huge. And so what I want to do now is pass it over to Dave to talk a little bit about our experience here. And then we'll see if there's anyone else who's on the call that would like to share from some of the other places that we've been. So Dave, over to you.
Hey everyone. Yeah, I've been thinking about like what I want to share here, and I resonate with so much with what Joe and Penny were saying. Maybe my experience from different levels, different perspectives, maybe. So, you know, I'm used to like sitting at my computer and seeing Joe and Penny and all of you fine folks on a computer screen. And wow, it's a much different experience having Joe and Penny inside my house here and sharing time together and food together and all that sort of thing. It's really cool getting to know them on a deeper level. And it was stressful, but in a good way, and exciting experience trying to, you know, plan some different events for the area for when Joe and Penny get here, and like thinking about how do I want to coordinate that with, you know, the folks that I know locally. So I've been going on a learning journey here, kind of seeing what works, what doesn't work, you know, a personal level of learning to ask for help, um, understanding my own capacities, realizing that I don't have to do it, you know, on my own. And wow, instead of like fighting against the existing things going on, of finding the people that you're in alignment with, and how much more joy and all those sorts of things that come about feeling productive, that sort of thing, when you find the people that you align with and that are on your same path, and like creating the new instead of trying to fight the old. So a couple of the events, and then learning with, you know, assumptions and expectations about what's going to happen, and just like learning to just kind of go with the flow of things can help you like really stay on track. Because, you know, there's a couple events that have gone like last night, and the first night went, I thought personally, exceptionally well. I was very excited about how those went. And then a couple other events yesterday, I'm very grateful for the people that did turn out, but didn't happen exactly how I thought they would, but that's okay. You know, we roll with what's real, and go from there. And just realizing in knowing that there's all sorts of people already working on this stuff. You know, when I first, you know, before even the design school, I first started thinking about these things. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to, what is all this, you know, the world's going to crap, and what do I have to do to like do this? So I'm thinking I got to save the world kind of thing. Well, how stupid is that? This oh my gosh. So when I actually started looking for what's real in the world, and I start, you know, so I came across Co-op Dayton here locally, and they have like something called a Community Transformation Academy. So that's what kind of started me locally here. And then I came across Agraria Center for Regenerative Practices in Florentina. There has been, well, she's been an amazing help in getting the event set up for last night. It would not have happened without her assistance. So the strategy I took was basically, you know, with the people that I know, with the relationships that I've created, and whatever levels of trust I have at this point in time, I don't know, let's just see what happens. I'll reach out, and if something germinates here, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't, and we'll just roll with what happens. And so far, I've been like really pleasantly surprised. Here, Joe and Penny are here at the house for a couple of days, and sharing all sorts of stuff, doing some wonderful events, and weaving, my strategy kind of close to the beginning. I eventually came across it was act locally and connect globally. So that is working out. And it really came to fruition, and saw it like come to life. And really at the event last night at Agraria, it felt like all that became real. So it feels like a really good place to stop there. So thanks, everyone.
Hmm. So yeah, I will remove the
See if we can
spotlight
see who's here.
and let's see.
There's Annie.
Annie's here and Kate is here.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh. Should we go in sequence of timing? And
Rita came to
and Rita came to one of the gatherings as well. I don't know, Kate, would you maybe like to go first and share a little bit about the experience in Madison? Would that be okay?
see if Will's here too, because he would need to go soon.
Yeah, and you're muted right now, so you have to unmute yourself. Oh, yep, still muted.
She
Oh,
got
there
it.
you go.
Oh, too close.
I can undo the spotlight.
So yeah, it was a journey here in Madison. We had about 4 weeks to kind of pull it together for Joe and Penny's visit for about a 24-hour period. So, and I kind of came in a little late in the game. A couple other women were more involved in the first week or so, and then 2 more of us were pulled in. And um, so it was, we're all older women, we're all elders, and so it was fairly intense. And um, to figure out how to best not only welcome Joe and Penny to our community, but to also have space for people to connect with each other locally, the people that showed up here, and also to share with Joe and Penny a lot of what's been going on in this area, both in permaculture and resiliency and sustainability and CSA, food and the whole shebang for decades. So, what we did in the morning, Joe and Penny did their kind of main presentation at a public library, and we had about 40 people attend, and that was very lovely. And the circle shared at the end of it, which I kind of had urged us to have that happen, and I was very glad I did, because what came up a lot in that sharing was a lot of ecological grief, people dealing with loss and grief around all of these, things that are happening on Earth. And so that was good. And then in the afternoon, we did an outdoor thing at the University of Wisconsin Arboretum, which has been around, and the first director was actually Aldo Leopold many, 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 many years ago. So we walked through and did some land sharing and water sharing and ritual at what's called the Big Springs. And that have been there a long time. And that was about a dozen people, I think. Do you think that's about right, Joe?
Yeah, I
And
think so.
yeah, and that was very lovely in its own way. It was very hot, and it's even hotter here today. So I don't have air conditioning, so I'm kind of reaching my cranky point. But it's and then in the evening we had another session in a church group room, Unitarian Church on the west side. And I don't know how many people was there, maybe 30,
Mhm.
anywhere between 20 and 30. And then we had I invited in local people involved with food and water. And a woman came by who was very involved with one of the very first community gardens in the area and told her story. And that goes back 50 years, right? She's in her 80s. So that was cool. And, that, I guess I want to say what I walked away from, and I've been very involved with the community for a long time around permaculture and sustainability and food even longer for decades. So I came away seeing once again that people are kind of feeling not connected, right? Around some of the things that are really important. I really liked what you talked about, Penny, with how, and you, Joe, and you've written stuff in the week since you've been gone from Madison, because really the water and the land have so much to teach us, and our communities aren't necessarily really good at that. I've tried to teach that through permaculture, and it's that kind of ability to slow down and listen, right? And to observe. I'm a big observer in permaculture. It's like I have a bad reputation because I'm always talking about, well, what did you observe? And but it's so with the land and the water, that's so important. So I really appreciate that was such a journey for you guys. It goes deep. And I've traveled across country and done that same kind of work, right? And it gives you something that all the meetings and all the all the sharings, all the organizations. I think one of the thing in this area is there are so many organizations. We're a pretty overall progressive community around a lot of this stuff for decades, and for like 100 years, if you include the conservation that came out of the University of Wisconsin. So, but it's how do you stay connected when there's so many people going into something from a different direction. So that became clear again. And also what became clear, the four elder women who organized it, we went away and went, so what do we have energy for now? And we all went, oh my gosh, summer is here, family is a priority. There's all these things. And that's okay, right? Because what I learned long ago is you wait and see what emerges, right? That you don't frantically have to grab on to something and say, this is it. Because even if for that moment it doesn't mean that it's going to be it down the road, right? And that it is always going to be evolving and changing. So it was a wonderful experience. And I really liked getting to know Joe and Penny a little bit, and especially Joe. Not that you're any less Penny, but Joe is a little bit of a prankster. He has a funny sense of humor.
It's
So,
true. It's true.
and it was delightful. But what I want to say is it brought a lot of joy to a lot of people, right? So the whole experience was really worth it. And some people even said that was the first time they'd felt hope in a long time. And so yay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Kate. I just want to say how deeply it left an impression upon us. The countless hours of devotion over many years of many people that are in those landscapes around Madison. It was just so evident to us. The roots run deep. We really felt that. We were there one day and we were like, what? It was so evident. So yeah. And Kate's a bit of a trickster too in her own way.
Prankster.
I'm going to play both of them. Just roll it. Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you for that sharing. And let's see here, remove the spotlights. And I think when I was looking through the list of people that are on here, I saw that Annie is here, who joined us in the Delta. And also Rita and Gwen are both here. Oh, and Claire,
Oh,
gosh, Claire, I see you
Claire!
there. Oh gosh, maybe Claire, would you like to share first? Because Claire was earlier in the time. I'll go to Claire first, and I'll just
Sure.
name, I saw Rita and Gwen who were with us at
In Boulder.
in Boulder. So people I'm putting on the spot, but Claire, over to you.
Yes, I was able to join Joe and Penny and Karen, and Bree was also there with her daughter Shara, and Jonathan and Victoria also joined us in the Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison journey. So it was really lovely to be able to connect in person, and I've and to stay, I was able to stay at Karen's house and just really be inspired and kind of enter into her Bog Witch world and really experience the storytelling and just her vision. You know, each place had its own unique experience. But I really appreciated Karen's. There's a sort of a real, it's very emergent from the ground up. There are a lot of things she's doing, and she's just very easygoing. I know she's off on her adventure right now and she's not on this call, right? So but very easygoing about how she approaches this and just accepts sort of what is going to emerge is what will happen, and feeling just at peace with that. And but there were some beautiful moments. I thought the moment with the Menominee man, a native man on the from the church that she's involved in, the Lutheran Church of the Great Spirit, down by the water on the lake, and you could just feel his heart. He'd never done anything like this before, but at least that's how I understood it. But the connection he made, I think, Joe, with you personally, and just the way that you carried what he shared in terms of, sort of honoring the water and bringing together. So much of that wisdom. I could feel the way that carried through for you on other places that you went. And so I really like that sort of weaving, to see those threads that kind of wove through your journey that sort of started there in a way. And just the intergenerational sort of connections that Karen is really nurturing. Uh, and and I think for me personally, it was really being, like somebody said, just feeling that sense of hope, just feeling that inspiration, seeing how people were taking, there was a place we visited in Milwaukee that had been like a missile site and a prison, and it had a very degraded landscape, Havenswood State Forest, that now is this vibrant, sort of space, educational space. They bring a lot of children into that space, and there's trails and native plants and pollinators. So it just really was a living example of how, even in the midst of all the degradation, that there's it. We as humans who care can come together and really renew a space that can really be really draw people in and support life right in those communities. So they were just it was wonderful. I was really glad to be able to be on that journey, and to feel like I was able to touch into it, and just even the other thing I would say, just just sharing meals and helping out and being part of the community in that sort of face-to-face way, especially since so much of what we're doing is online, just really touched me, and I'll carry that with me. So I really appreciate it. That's what I'll share.
Uh, Thank you so much, Claire. Just really feeling the connection from when we were at the mounds, the Zazatlan, and all of that. I just noticed that Jonathan and Victoria are here too. I don't know if either of them would like to share before we move on. So just open space. Jonathan, would you like to share?
Sure, sure. Victoria and I are still in Portland, but it was a great part of the beginning of our journey to meet up with you and the folks in Milwaukee and Madison and to get re-inspired by the whole effort that you're making. It's just, as someone in my 80s now, I don't have the kind of energy that I see in you and Penny, and that I admire so much. And it's the bioregional organizing and activism, and writing and communicating is, I feel, really making a difference. It kind of alters my sense of what our historical period is about. And it's about regeneration and rediscovery of our connection with nature. And so I really thank you for, kind of awakening me and us to that possibility.
And I absolutely loved being in Milwaukee and Madison. And we stayed over with one of the organizers, which was awesome. And Claire, it was so great to be with you there too. And Karen in the flat. We've met before, but it was really great to be there. And someone said about going around the room and letting people speak. That was so profound. And just to see how much how real all of this was for people, and how unusual it was, and like finding my tribe kind of experience one by one. So I just really encourage everyone to let people speak, maybe at the beginning and the end, because people don't know each other. And if there's time for people to go around the room and say who they are and what they've done, what they've been doing, and then maybe after the talks and the presentations, where this might lead them and how this might connect, how this can come together. So I really appreciate the people who take the time to design these events, and that we learn from them. And I would say we didn't attend the second time that you did a presentation in the area, Milwaukee and Madison. And I'm sorry that we didn't do both, because it's always different. There isn't, it's not the same presentation. Every group, it's a different presentation. And we came in probably in the last 20 minutes in Madison and heard people sharing. And, that was, I just can't wait to be doing that where we are in Rochester. So thank you.
I just want to add a quick comment that, first of all, Victoria, you have grown and evolved so much since we met you. And the ways that you would share into those circles were so filled with your own journey and the learnings from it that I think were deeply valuable and meaningful. So I just want to name and presence that. And that Jonathan actually brought and gifted us a signed copy of his book. And that our trip became part of his unofficial book tour to just encourage people to go and check out Jonathan's book, which you can find on Possible Planet, and to see what at your ripe, young, chipper age, Jonathan, you're still at it, and just how inspiring that is to us young whippersnappers. So just wanted to really honor that. So thank you both for everything. And I want to ask if Rita would like to share next, maybe kind of continuing our loop. And then
Rita
Gwen
and
and
yeah.
Gwen, if you're there. Oh, Gwen, you are there.
Yeah.
So then how about if I invite both of you onto the screen and you can share a little bit about the experience that you had in Boulder.
Rita.
There's Rita.
Yeah, it was just really fun to get to road
Yeah,
trip
it was a
with Rita.
7-hour commute.
7-hour commute.
Rita, did you
My-
want to go?
Yeah, my
Your sound is cutting out a little bit, Rita. Maybe a poor
personal
connection.
reflection was moving from, probably I may cut out. Can you hear me now?
It's
Yeah.
a little better. Yes.
Okay. moving from our region in the Colorado River Basin over to the Front Range was really meaningful this time in a way of feeling the water diversions going under us as we went from west to east, and realizing the population on that Front Range would not be there unless the
Oh, darn.
waters. It's in the chat.
So Rita, for some reason, your sound is cutting
And
out. Something, Rita, just because
about our experience at Nyland Co-housing, and I'll let Gwen.
yeah, Rita, you're
Yeah, my internet's unstable, so I'll let Gwen speak.
yeah. And I'll just express what Rita was saying for others who don't know, and then pass to Rita. For those of you who don't know, the insanity of Colorado is that idiots dug tunnels underneath the Continental Divide through the mountains to take water from the western slopes of the Colorado River Basin to make it possible to have the large population centers on the dry east side. So Denver, Colorado, just to give you a feel, used to have occasional gatherings of up to 20,000 people. Now it has 3.4 million people. And that's partly by taking the water from the western slopes. So the sheer insanity of that. So I want to name that part and then pass it over to Gwen to share.
Yeah, I just want to say that the thing that, other than, getting to hug Penny and Joe, which was always such a treat, and just, it's special to be together in person. I'm getting all teary. The thing that really stood out for me was the model of what was going on there at Friends Farm and the Nyland Co-housing. They have a beautiful co-housing development. Some of you may be familiar with those. It's dense housing, but done in a very organic way that allows for the building of community. And I think that's what's so special about co-housing, is that it's not just these multifamily housing unit boxes that we see most places, but it's done in a way that allows for a greater sharing among the community. And the best thing is that it was organized around a farm where everybody has, sort of co-ownership and investment and, works at it. And we need more of those kinds of models because they take a while to establish, like a community garden. It takes a while for people to figure out their stuff and, come together and figure out how it's all going to work. But to look for opportunities to start these communities that are formed around food production, and making sure that the whole model is working and is self-sustaining to as great a degree as possible. They're just really, really precious. And you see the people that are drawn to them are really awesome people. It was really fun to meet that group of people. They were really skilled at the pro-social stuff. And that's another thing that you see happening in co-housing developments. There's often an awareness around, the nurturing the pro-social behaviors that make that work. So yeah, I just wanted to say, let's look for more ways to make those kinds of things happen.
Yeah, thank you, Gwen. And I'll just add that even though Penny was in and out of running to the hospital for her mother, what happened in Boulder was an awakening after many years of work, a new level of potential for bioregional organizing in the Front Range, and with really capable leaders. Mm-hmm. There was the team that facilitated, that's called the Spirit of the Front Range, is what they've called themselves, like 8 people who co-facilitated the event, and they were all really highly capable people. So just to name and recognize that was so beautiful. Mm-hmm. So thank you, Gwen. Thank you, Rita. And I think we'll now go over to Annie. Let me just do some spotlight removals. And then there we go. So Annie, would you like to share about our time in the Delta?
I would. Oh my goodness. It's been so gorgeous to listen to everyone so far. And just all the organizing on the groundwork that was done. My time with Joe and Penny, Kieran Topawala, some of you may know him from the Taikaronto activation some years ago, but Kieran and I came over with his wife, Shivani, and we got extended time with Joe and Penny, and we got to share Guinness and fantastic redfish and duck gumbo and all kinds of great things together. So it was just a lovely time. But what I really feel so moved to call in here is the great healing work that was really my call to go to the Delta, because when I'm recently retired for the second time, so I had the time and space that I could have gone and met Joe and Penny a lot of different places, but I said I just felt so called by that Delta. And one reason was that, we all have 8 great grandparents, right? And I can follow those 8 lines of my family. And I knew one of my great grandmothers into my 20s, my maternal great grandmother. And she lived in Memphis always. So right there, we would trek across from West Texas and cross that big muddy river. And, that was a huge moment. Like, we're almost there, when we would get across that long bridge. And then I had also visited, because 2 other lines came from the area of the Lewis and Clark, Missouri entering the Mississippi area, which is really just north of St. Louis, the St. Charles area. And so I knew all that of my family. And then I have family along the Tennessee that were involved in the Confederacy. And so clearly supportive of all of that. And so last summer, and I'll just call this in because this was a huge part of it ultimately, there's another global community called Unity Earth that's been around for almost 10 years now. And they had a Meeting in the Middle, Healing the Soul of America retreat last summer in St. Louis and Kansas City. And I went to the Kansas City portion of it last year with that intent for healing the heartland. And at some point, I realized they're having their annual World Unity Week during the week we would be there in the Delta. After I decided I would go down on Tuesday and meet them at the Delta, because I just said, I've been in New Orleans before, but not with that intent to visit the Delta. And let me tell you, it was like an hour plus drive out there, and Joe and Penny staked it out the first afternoon. So we were good to go that next morning live on World Unity Week, that we brought that in. And I just want to, all these waters that Joe and Penny have and others have brought our focus on, that Delta is not just like a point in space. It's huge. And it's even as they left that area, they were still talking about, we're in the Delta, because it's not like just right there at New Orleans, because we need a really big container for that much drainage of all of it. And I just really want to call in that opportunity for the human stories healing through these waters, and through what Joe and Penny did. Yeah. And we did get to go live on World Unity Week, and it was gorgeous, the way it was interwoven. And I will mention this. I don't know what time are we at. I do have queued up here, Joe and Penny. The one other thing that is part of this whole theme is I have a 1-minute video of some of the 5-year-olds from the school, and they're scattering not dandelion seeds, but very similarly, milkweed seeds. And I shared it during World Unity Week during another thing on children that I did. And their excitement and all of that, I would love for us to just listen to it if I can be co-hosted. just for all of us to be activated by the children's excitement and energy over these seeds, right? So anyway, it's a 1 minute video, and not to take off of what we were just talking about, but
Well, Annie, how about this? I just made you co-host, so you can do that in a moment.
yeah, okay.
But first, I just want to say, I wanted to share two very brief stories. Both of them are related to what you just said, because I didn't share my my insights from this travel like Penny did, and I just want to name one of them was at the Delta, and the other was at the Confluence in St. Louis. I'll start with the one in St. Louis. So a lot of you know that I grew up in Missouri, and you probably know that I didn't really like it when I was a kid. Couldn't wait to get away from there. And I always disliked something about Missouri, but I loved the Ozarks. So on our first day, when we were at the confluence in Missouri, where the Missouri and Mississippi meet, we had some people gather with us. So Penny and I really didn't get to have a bit of ceremony. So we went back the next morning. And we went back, just the two of us, and Penny did her connection with the water, and I smoked tobacco and sat and offered blessings. And then I stood up and turned around, where to my right was the mighty Mississippi, and to my left was the much mightier Missouri. For anyone who knows these rivers, the two rivers are really different. And I walked like 10 feet to my right, just a couple of steps to the Mississippi. And I just leaned over and said, thank you to the Mississippi, just a little moment of attention. And I put my hand in the water. And what I felt was deep peace, that this was a feminine energy, that the Mississippi, what we call the Mississippi River up to that point, is this gentle, peaceful, deep spirit. Then I walked 10 feet across to the Missouri, which is churning and dangerous, and entire trees are washing down, and you can feel the Rocky Mountains birth this thing. And it's 500 miles longer than the Mississippi, 2,500 miles to get to that point. And I lean down and I say, thank you to the Missouri. And I put my hand in the water, and I felt this very different personality and this very different energy. But I also felt, for the first time in my life, that I was attributing the word Missouri to its proper place. And something shifted in me. I was like, I grew up kind of hating Missouri, like had the rebelliousness and needing to leave. And for the first time in my life, I could love who Missouri is, because the Missouri is that river. And that healing is so big. So now that leads to the other reflection I wanted to share, which was when we were in the Delta. Because Penny and I had been traveling to all these confluences, and we'd seen these great meetings of water beings. We saw the Milk River, which comes down from Calgary, joining the Missouri in eastern Montana. We saw the Yellowstone River joining the Missouri in North Dakota. And we saw the Cimarron River joining the Canadian in New Mexico. On and on. We saw these joinings. So then we get to the Delta. And like you said, it's not one point. I had to fly the drone to get a glimpse of how endless it seems. I didn't see it, I saw how endless it seems. Because basically, for those who don't know, the Mississippi River is not one river in the Delta. There are several major rivers that are giant threads, dumping huge amounts of water and sediments across a vast geographic range. But what I felt when we were there was I felt the personality of each river mixing. And I felt the presence of stories. I felt the buffalo. I felt the sagebrush. I felt that black bird with the red wings that we saw everywhere. I felt the immense, this presence of the cottonwoods that track the rivers across the plain. Just on and on. I felt story after story after story. I felt the story of the Lakota. I felt the story of the Oneida. I felt the story of the genocide of the Dakota, which we experienced at Pike Island in Minneapolis. I felt these stories. And I felt the presence of stories, too many stories. Most of them I don't know. And somehow, the father of all waters, the Mississippi, cleanses her continent, cleanses his continent. He brings all the stories together to the great homecoming, which is that all life comes from the ocean. And all life learned how to come onto continents temporarily for the last 500 million years. It's mostly been in the oceans. And that all of those sediments and all those waters were the stories of a continent unleashed back to the great burial grounds of this estuary, and that the stories were being buried too, but they were being buried like seeds. They were being buried to birth new life. And so the Delta for me was like this great hallowed ground of composting the stories. And that in a couple of days, the United States, this weird temporary empire, is going to celebrate, like, pump its chest, say 250 years. And I was like, I don't even care about that temporary blip. Mississippi is much older and wiser and will be here way after. And I felt that in the Delta. So as the water's coming together with all those sediments, and all those sediments making endless, like countless numbers of islands, were always changing in number and position, and they were coming back to the sea. And that Turtle Island was doing this continuously. So, so this great churning of life is so big, we can't see it. It's like, it's so big, we can't see it, and yet we're always inside of it. So I just felt that cleansing so deeply at the Delta, felt it so deeply. And then when we talked to Tony, our amazing waiter at the gumbo shop, who told us about the conspiracy theories and the ways they were basically wiping out and destroying Black communities during Hurricane Katrina to build their cheaply built condos and sell them. And we could feel even that story will be washed away by the Delta. And then the next day when we drove up to Clarksdale, Mississippi, the home of the Delta Blues, where a man named Muddy Waters took the blues to Chicago and made it world famous, this blues guitarist, and all the people from that place. And what we saw when we went to the Delta Blues Museum is all of these African slaves who gave birth to blues, jazz, and rock and roll. They all said it came from the land, that it was born from the Delta. It wasn't even born from their slavery toiling in the Delta. It was born from something deeper, the Delta. And any of you who have ever been between Memphis and New Orleans will know those are dangerous, overwhelming lands where the flooding is beyond human control. And it spans hundreds of miles. And so for us, the Delta really did start to close in Memphis. And we felt that. And then when we started following the Tennessee River out to Appalachia, it's different. But all that energy arrives to the Delta. And everything on the Missouri River and everything in the Arkansas River, they all arrive to the Delta. So just think of this great healer who can just receive our pain almost without limit and love us no matter what. And that's the Delta. And most of us have no idea that we have this huge help, that Turtle Island is healing us constantly in the Delta. So I encourage all of you who are listening on this call to find your Delta. Find your Delta, where the waters of your land cleanse your people's bones and bring them back to the sea. It was so incredible for us to be there. And so that's what I wanted to share. And Annie, you just named it so beautifully that I wanted to share it here. And now what I want to do is just take us off spotlight here. I know that we're now at time, and the purpose of today, as I said at the beginning, was to sort of review what happened in the first half of our learning journey and point the direction toward where we're going, but also to really emphasize the power of these immersive experiences. And what you can hear from these stories that people have been sharing, and there were a lot more that we've been meeting with along the way.
You want to do the video?
Yeah, and Annie, I'll invite you to share that video in just a second, so that we can hear the children. I think those of us who can stay should hear the children. But I want to just say that we have to go out into the land and we have to feel the stories passing through us. And we have to feel us as stories passing through the land. We need to do this. All of us, each of us need to do this. And that's going to be an important part of the second half of this learning journey, is going into the design practice of the Dandelion strategy and feeling this awakening in so many places. And what you just got was a sampling of what Penny and I have been a part of in the last month. And that's just Penny and I, and it's just a part of it. A lot of you have been doing your own things in parallel. Penny and I have been communicating with some of you about the incredible organizing you are doing in your bioregions that were not in this pilgrimage of ours. This is happening in so many places now. And so, so to close us out, Annie, let's bring us home with those kids. Do you have that ready?
All right. This is, I'm on a little tablet, so just be patient with me just a minute, but it is a 61-second video here. And I just love it as an activation. And absolutely what you said, Joe, also all the work that's being done along this watershed is also, you know, as you talked about how it's replenishing, we're doing that. So let the children encourage us here. Okay, give me.
And while Annie's getting that ready, I'll just say that Penny and I felt the presence of all of our other pilgrimages. So it's all there. All right, here we go. And Annie, I think you might be muted.
I think it'll still work.
Oh, okay.
She has to mute.
Cool.
That's not open yet.
That's a blood.
That dark brown one.
These are another one.
Yeah, those have already
Aliens!
popped open.
Aliens!
Yep, those are about done, aren't they?
A seed flew over there. One of these seeds.
Did it?
Look, I got one. Whoa, this is so pretty. Hey, look, I got a seed. Oh, look. It started laying eggs. Oh, they have me.
Oh, is there a creature?
No, I got a seed. No, it's just, it's so, it looks like beautiful white ones.
Wow.
It's the beautiful
It does.
ones.
The seeds are just popping out, aren't they?
And it has little brown stuff on there.
And the little brown stuff is probably the
Wow.
seed itself. Hang
Wow,
on just a
there's
minute. What's that?
bunch of those kind of
Oh,
white
yes,
flowers.
that's a fresh one, and it's got a little seed right
No,
there.
wait, I found a bug. Yep, bug on that leaf right there.
There
Oh,
very
yeah.
often are some
It's a
bugs
little
here.
bug.
Oh, that's a really cool one.
I know.
Yellow and black.
It looks like a butterfly.
And
That's a bug.
that's not open yet.
Oh my gosh, that's so adorable. It reminded me of one thing that I'll bring to our closing, which is as Penny and I traveled, we were in the time of the seeds being released by the cottonwoods. So there were very few places that we traveled, very few, without the snow dusting of cottonwood flowing in the air. For any of you who know the cottonwoods, they are a sacred totemic connector of this continent in ways that you'll experience at this time of year. We went on a float trip in the Current River in the Ozarks and had swirling cottonwood floating on top of the water. And then we're in Wyoming and cottonwood is blowing in the air. It's like that. It is a great connector. So go hug a cottonwood tree too. They are all around. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Annie, for that beautiful sharing. And we look forward to visiting more of you in person as we do other travels and here in this learning journey now that we've started again. So thank you, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.